Well, my foundations in Indian food were established in hotels in India, and it's only the last 18 years that I've been cooking in London. My philosophy has always been to retain the purity of flavors and yet present it in a food that is more appealing to the eye. And that has been my focus the last few years. It's usually a wow because typically we expect Indian food to be a sauce and with meat or vegetables in a bowl, garnished with cream or coriander, maybe a dollop of butter. That was the extent of our creativity. I think today we take it onto a plate. It allows you to add textures, other components that complement whether it's color or texture. And I think that really lifts the food from just being a bowl of sauce. The opportunity to move to London, of course, brought with it a wealth of ingredients that we get to use there. And certainly, while my focus again has been on the purity of flavor, to use elements like scallops or samphire are something that's quite unusual to the Indian palate. But it was hugely exciting for me to marry those into the dishes. Whether it's adding texture or color, those fascinating ingredients make it look so much prettier. I think a lot of our dishes are born out of happy accidents. I think certainly the advances that we see in molecular cooking today, most of them are from the food manufacturing industry that have come into mainstream use. So certainly those are accidents that have worked out well. And for me, I think it's also important to learn from other people's accidents. So the more inspiration you can get, the more you can learn from others' mistakes, it really helps you along the way. I think the hard sell is in getting the customers to try it, because when they hear of a tandoori mushroom, they expect the usual cup mushroom with a filling and put onto a skewer in the tandoor. When they see a beautifully plated salad of exotic mushrooms, it's certainly not what they would have expected. And I like to always offer, even in my dish descriptions, I prefer to undersell the dish and let the actual dish speak for itself. So I believe very much in simplicity, and I keep my descriptions as simple as possible. And that final reveal is only when you actually see the dish. So that's how it's always worked for me. I'm a huge believer that when it comes to styling food, the plate that you use plays quite a big role. People often underestimate the value add that a plate brings. A good plate, and we have a diverse selection to choose from, whether it's made of wood or stoneware or melamine or even china. But I think the textures on the plate or the shape of the plate itself can transform a dish. Khichdi was a good example you just brought out. Serving it in a bowl garnished with chopped onions or a sprig of coriander is only going to take it that far. You put it into a pasta plate with a nice swirl of cream or a few micro vegetables garnished on the top, and it's transformed into something that's sensational. I think the importance is to focus on the core profile of the dish. You don't want to take that away from anything else that you're adding. Value add could be textures. Certainly you like to have a bit of crunch. So even the way your potato crisps are arranged on top of a khichdi could be a great way to give it height and not have a flat mush. Also micro cress, which is very fashionable today. It's possible to even grow micro coriander in your kitchen garden or on a windowsill, and it looks much prettier than just chopped herbs. So I think that's few styling tips I can give you. But the important thing is to retain the purity of flavor of the main dish. Some chefs, of course, separate the dish or deconstruct the dish into its individual components. and then put them back onto a plate. So the sauce is maybe just a swish of sauce on the base, and the meat is then plated very nicely over it, and you build textures and layers into it. It's a bit like imagining doing a piece of art, and you add layers that add value. I think Indian food suffers the same symptoms that Italian food has suffered for a long time, where the expectation was more on how it tasted and less on how it looked. Today that gap is being bridged gradually, and that's only a good thing for chefs like us. I think my go-to on a long day would be a quick khichdi, and we make it with millets nowadays at home, which is even healthier. I think my food philosophy, I know there's a saying that never trust a thin chef, but I think that perception is changing as well. I think chefs are ambassadors of their cuisine, and if I tell you that the pillars of my food heritage is based on heritage, health and happiness, I need to walk the talk as well. So I think it's important for us to be fit. We taste an enormous gamut of food during the day. Balancing that with the right exercise is super important, so we can actually walk the talk. I think my earliest inspiration, and as most chefs would probably say the same, is my mum. I think the smells wafting out of her kitchen on a weekend morning is something that has stayed with me forever. My grandmom's cooking as well has been hugely inspirational. I had the opportunity of tasting her cuisine in my childhood. She passed away when we were quite young, but those food memories stay forever. So clearly they have been my earliest inspirations. Inspirations further on along my professional career have been several, of course, far too many to name. And I often say that it doesn't need to be a star-studded chef to be an inspiration. My inspiration can come from a street hawker who's done the same pot of biryani 365 days a year for decades. His dedication and his perfection is something that's hugely inspiring as well. My favorite ingredient, and not just to provide heat but also flavor, is the green chili. People don't realize that the chili was brought to India by the Portuguese only about 300 years ago. But it's become so ingrained in our psyche that it's such a big part of our cuisine. We eat it raw, we eat it in salads, we eat it in sags and curries where it's used more for heat. I like to use chili for the flavor as well. The flavor of a toasted red chili in an oriental dish, the smells that you get out of a sautéed green chili or a flash fried chili with just chaat masala or salt on top, for me has to be my absolute go-to flavor. If I have the time, it would be biryani. But for a quick meal, I can be very simple with my taste. It would just be toast and jam, or toast and a spread. What really drew me to Sumeru is the fact that they are setting themselves out to challenge the perception that frozen can be better than fresh. It's something as a chef that I truly believe in. To give you an example, your average fruit and veg that's in a local store near you has probably traveled for 20 days to get where it is. What kind of conditions it was stored in or transported in is anybody's guess. Frozen is typically at source and retains the freshness, locks in the nutrients, and as long as your freezer is operating at a good temperature, it can last for a long time as well. Gradually, I think we are beginning to agree and understand that frozen can actually be better than fresh. So that's an exciting space to be in. I think in India, with the increased accent on convenience, having a freezer and a well-stocked freezer is going to be hugely important.